Great. Welcome, everybody. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? Yeah, good. Great. Well, welcome, everybody. We have a nice big group. We're going to give a few more minutes just for everybody to log in. My name is Melissa Rosenberg. I'm with the Howard County Autism Society, and we're very happy to have you here. Obviously, a very popular topic as school starts back up. And we have quite a few folks registered, so thank you for remembering to stay muted while our speakers do the presentation. And we're going to give it just a couple more minutes, as I know we have more people who will be logging in. And right now I'm going to introduce Beth Benevides, who will be leading the session for us. And she's going to give a couple introductions of our guest speakers. So thank you. Go ahead, Beth.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening and for sharing an hour or so of your time. I know that it has been a busy beginning of the week for all of us as parents and school system employees. And so I really do thank you for being here. Our goal this evening is to help you understand the alternative service delivery model and the plan that is going to accompany the alternative service delivery model for students with special education needs. We want parents to not only understand the plan, but we want to help you understand what you may expect in terms of a timeline, when you're going to receive the proposal, what it may look like, what will be on it, what your role is, and what you'll do with the proposal. So we're going to help you understand the timeline, when you're going to receive things, when your response is needed. We'll go through what the options are for the plan. And then we're just going to give you some tips on preparing for that initial conference with your special educator or case manager. So we hope to do all of this in a short amount of time. We put this presentation together very quickly because all of this is happening very quickly, but we wanted you to have this information even before you see that plan come home. Okay, so what we will share this evening is specific to Howard County. Every county has their own reopening plan. Every county is doing their own thing with special education, but the information we're sharing tonight is specific to Howard County and the documents and timelines related to Howard County. So I'm grateful for the collaboration of so many partners here between the Disability Rights Maryland, the school system, our advocates within the school system, CCAC. We really couldn't put these presentations together to be so robust and complete without that collaboration. So I'm going to introduce some people that are on the line tonight and who will be co-presenting with me. And our goal, all of us, is just to provide you with direct and accurate information. So with that, I'm going to just call on each of my co-presenters and ask them to please unmute themselves while they speak and just introduce themselves so that you have a face behind the voice and the name. So first off is Leslie Seid Margolis from Disability Rights Maryland.
Good evening, everybody. As Beth said, my name is Leslie Seid Margolis. I'm a managing attorney at Disability Rights Maryland, which is Maryland's protection and advocacy organization. I manage our education work, and we take cases across the state and we don't charge a fee for our legal work. And we do individual cases, and we do systemic work and policy work.
Thank you. Trish Gunshore. Trish, are you unmuted? Let's see. Okay. Can't hear Trish. Okay, I'm going to skip over Trish. I'll come back to her.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry, took me a minute.
That's okay. Welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Trish Gunshore. I'm the newest coordinator for the Department of Special Education, and I oversee compliance, non-public, and family support. So I'm not new to the county, but I am new to this position. Good evening.
Thank you, Trish. Ann Schultz.
Hi, I'm Ann Scholes with the Family Support and Resource Center. We're part of Howard County School System. We support families of students with IEPs and IFSPs.
Thank you. And another great collaborator with the Howard County Autism Society is our CCAC for Howard County, which is the Special Education Community Advisory Council or Committee. I'm going to ask the chairs, Stephanie Carr and Mai Hall, to introduce themselves so that you will know who they are. Stephanie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Carr. I'm the co-chair of CCAC. I'm a member of Dyslexia, the Howard County chapter as well. Thank you, Beth, and everyone for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Mai, if you're on, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Mai Hall. I am the other co-chair of CCAC, and I'm happy to be here and ready to learn with all of you folks. And CCAC is the other parent advocacy group for Howard County.
Thank you, Mai. So I think it's wonderful that so many of us are here to support you, and it's really important to me that you know who you can turn to and who you can lean on for support and to have your questions answered. I professionally am with the Hussman Foundation and the Hussman Institute for Autism, but I do provide advocacy support to families through the Howard County Autism Society and through their family advocacy program. So that's why you may see me in a couple different avenues, but that explains that. Okay, and last but not least, I'd like to introduce Roger Thibodeau. Roger will be monitoring our chat box this evening, and he will be pulling forward questions that aren't addressed in the slides to bring forward to the presenters. So Roger, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Thibodeau. I'm the Education Advocacy Chair for the Howard County Autism Society, and welcome. And big thanks to Beth and CCAC and the school system for putting this on, and Leslie. So thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, I promise that's it with introductions. So we can go ahead and jump right in. Okay. So what is the alternative service delivery model? This refers to the school system's service delivery model while we are in virtual, blended, or small group learning. And what does this mean specific for special education services? So many of you will recall that in the spring, we had something called the Individual Continuity of Learning Plan. And that was that document that came home to families. It said what was changing or what could or couldn't be provided to your child during the school closure. And you signed off on that, and that was the amendment to your child's IEP. To remain consistent with guidance from MSDE, Howard County has now adopted the term Alternative Service Delivery Model Plan. So you won't be hearing about the ICOL or the ICOL or the COL plan anymore. You're going to be hearing about the ASDM plan. So get that acronym in your mind because that's what we're going to be referring to it throughout this presentation, and that's what you're going to be hearing about going forward. Most important to note is this ASDM plan is an amendment to the IEP. It is not your child's new IEP. It doesn't take place of your child's IEP that's in existence. It is only an amendment, and it's only in place while students are receiving instruction and services through the new temporary service delivery model. Okay, so it's based on your child's IEP that's in existence and the school system's current delivery model, which is virtual. Okay, and the plan is to address your students' specially designed instruction and the IEP services that are going to be implemented and evaluated. So how does the ASDM plan get implemented? It will be implemented through co-teaching by special education teachers during general education instruction. It may be implemented through individual and small group instruction, which is virtual. It may be implemented through adaptations to assignments to support your child's access and to address IEP goals. It may be provided through related services via teletherapy and or opportunities for students to engage in instruction and social interaction with their peers. Again, virtual for the time being. So just as no two IEPs are alike, no two ASDM plans will be alike. Okay, they should be, and they are required to be individual and child-specific determinations about how specially designed instruction is going to be delivered and how that IEP is going to be implemented. So depending on the student's IEP and needs, the plan will address in great detail any specific changes that are related to all of the sections or each of the sections that you find in your child's IEP. So this would be everything from annual goals and objectives to supplementary aids and services and program modifications, communication needs, technology or assistive technology that your child needs, behavioral interventions, accommodations, transition activities if that applies to your child, special education services, career and technology education, and related services such as speech or OT. So the plan will address any changes in these areas specific to your child. It doesn't mean it's going to address every single one of them if things can be implemented exactly as they already are on the IEP, but your IEP always takes precedence. But if there are changes, these will be noted on the plan for any of these areas. So you may recall that the individual continuity of learning plan that you received in the spring was kind of like a 1 or 2 pager, probably a 2-pager, and it had this chart in the middle and a couple things that were different. This plan is much more detailed than that. It follows what your IEP looks like. It has sections for each of these areas, and the case manager will be filling in each of these very specific areas for your child. So it's a much more significant document in terms of scope. And I think just what could be included in there. So this is how the process works. Last week, your case manager and the related service providers were reviewing your child's IEP, getting to know what your child's needs are. This week, the case managers and related service providers will be observing your child in any online instruction, synchronous learning, any one-on-one meetings, anything like that. This is the week that observations will be done to see how your child's doing, what some of those needs might be. Next week, week 2 of school, the case managers and related service providers will be preparing the proposal. They'll be preparing this plan to share with you. So this is what Dr. Savage and the Department of Special Education have laid out as the first step in the process of developing the plan. Okay, and pay attention to those timelines. So again, case managers will be reviewing the current IEP that's in effect, and they'll be asking, can this IEP be implemented as it's written, even while we're in virtual? Or are there any new student or family-specific needs that we need to address due to this alternative service delivery model because we're in virtual? So then step 2, once they've kind of answered those questions, things will happen. If the case manager says the IEP can be implemented as written, there aren't any new students' needs, there's nothing that needs to change or be modified in any way, we're just going to implement the IEP as written. And that will be sent home. Parents will be notified of that. If, however, they identify that there are new, different, or additional student needs, one of 2 things can happen. They can amend the IEP with parent agreement outside of an IEP team meeting, or they will review the IEP through the IEP team meeting. Okay, so parents are going to have some choices. I'll explain what all of the options are. But again, the IEP will either be implemented as it's written, it will be amended, which is this ASDM plan, or the IEP will have to be revised, and that will take place, that will be done through an IEP team meeting. By September 21st, parents should have received a proposal from their case manager. If you do not hear from your case manager by September 21st, parents are encouraged to email the school administrator, so that's your school principal, and or your special education instructional team leader. So not your case manager. In some cases, your case manager might be the instructional team leader, and then the principal will be helping out here. But again, your school administrator, and instructional team leader for your school. If you do not know who either of those people are, you should be able to go to your school's website and find out under special education who the instructional team leader is. If you have questions about that, reach out to any one of us. Ann Schultz would be an excellent resource for this at the Family Support and Resource Center. She can tell you that quickly, and she can provide you with emails if necessary. Okay, I'm going to highlight this again because this is really important and we want parents to hear this repeatedly. Amend the IEP means an amendment to your child's existing IEP. The ASDM plan is not a new IEP. It is an amendment to your plan. It's kind of like, I'm sorry, to your IEP. It's kind of attached to it. And then as soon as we go back into school, as soon as schools are fully open and your child goes back, the IEP that was in existence before we went virtual will be fully implemented. That will go right back to being the only document that's considered. Okay, so what is your involvement and what is your role as parent? Collaboration with parents is required. You are a member of the IEP team. So we want to encourage parents to be involved, to give input, to ask questions. When that proposal comes home, it is only a draft. It is not finalized. It is waiting for your input. It is waiting for your involvement. So until you and a case manager agree to the plan, it is not finalized. Until you sign off, even if the case manager says we can fully implement the IEP as it's written, you still need to sign off on that because it's giving you the opportunity to say, I think something else, I need to conference with you. I think something else needs to be done, or something else, we need an IEP meeting to revise this IEP. It's no longer, relevant, or it's no longer accurate. We need an IEP meeting. You have the right to ask for that, even if the team says that the IEP can be fully implemented. If you're feeling like, no, it cannot, you have a right at any time to call an IEP team meeting to discuss your child's progress or needs. So there are several options for parents to consider, as I said, and we'll go through each of those. Before you get the plan, in the next week or so, I'm going to encourage you to consider some of these questions and maybe jot down some notes so that you're prepared for your initial conference with your teacher or with the case manager. Some of the things that you might want to share is whether your child was even able to access virtual learning in the spring or during the summer. Were there supports necessary? Did you have to provide support? What was the student's performance in the spring distance learning model? How has the student made progress on IEP goals and objectives in the last 6 months? Has there been any notable regression in the last 6 months? Have you done things with your child that were especially helpful and showed progress? What are your priorities during virtual learning for your student? What accommodations and adaptations may be necessary? What materials does your child need at home to support their learning? And are there concerns around your child's schedule? Those were some of the questions that we could come up with, but I'm sure there are others, and I'm sure there are other things that you may want to add. Put all of that parental input in writing. Okay, go ahead, start making that list, start thinking about some of these things. These are really important topics to address with your team, whether it's informally, whether it's through writing, just something that you send in advance, or whether it's at a formal IEP meeting. We're always going to encourage you to send that parental input in. Okay, so step 3 of the process is that parents will respond. So once the parents receive the plan proposal, they should review it carefully and be prepared to respond in writing in the space provided on the proposal. There are several options for parents to consider, and they will need to select one. Option 1 is that you agree with the proposal and do not require an informal phone conference to address what has been proposed. That says that you understand that you'll receive follow-up documentation and additional communication. If you choose option 1, at the bottom, you'll check that, and at the bottom, you will sign and date the form, and then you'll return the form by email to the case manager. Option 2 says, I agree with the proposal, but I'd still like to discuss my child's programming with you, as case manager, through an informal phone conference. Not a formal IEP meeting, an informal phone conference. The teacher will have proposed a date and time on the plan that is sent home. So by checking this box, it says, I am available on the date and time you proposed. Option 3, just a little bit different, says you agree with the proposal. You'd still like to discuss it through an informal phone conference, but you're not available at the date and time proposed. You need a different time to meet. So you would check that option. Again, whether you've checked option 1, 2, or 3, you will sign at the bottom, date it, and return it to your child's case manager. Option 4 says, I'm not sure how I feel about the proposal, and I'd like to discuss it through an informal phone conference before I agree or disagree. And I'm available on the date and time that was proposed. And option 5 similarly says that you're still not sure how you feel about the proposal. You'd like to discuss it through an informal phone conference before agreeing or disagreeing, but you need a different time than was proposed to meet. And so you're asking the teacher to provide you with additional date and time. Again, whichever of these options you choose, you would sign and date it at the bottom and return it to the case manager. Option 6 says, I do not agree with the proposal, and I'd like to discuss it through an informal conference. And I'm available on the date and time you proposed. Option 7, same thing, only request a different date and time. Okay, so this is saying I don't agree with the proposal, and I'd like to have an informal conference. Again, you would sign and date it that this is your selection, that you do not agree with the proposal. You're just signing and dating that is your selection, and you're returning it. So the case manager knows to go ahead and set up an informal conference. The final option is that you do not consent, you do not agree to the ASDM plan without a formal IEP team meeting. So by checking this box, you're saying, I would like to schedule a formal IEP team meeting. And saying that you understand the team meeting will be convened virtually and that it will be held as soon as possible. And in the meantime, virtual learning opportunities and services may be implemented for your child until that meeting can be held. If you choose option 8, just as you chose 1 through 7, you would still sign and date at the bottom of the letter and return it to your case manager. Again, by signing and dating this form, it is not saying anything other than you have selected, you are only agreeing and saying that you consent to whatever option you selected. Okay, so it's basically saying that you alone check the right option, check the option that you chose. Okay, so a few notes. Also on this plan, on the proposal that comes home, there's a box that says questions and concerns. You can list your questions and concerns here if you have a few, but you may attach a separate list. Remember that list of questions I presented earlier. If you want to answer some of those and attach it, whatever parental input you would like to provide, you can attach it, and simply in that section that says questions and concern, write see attached parental input so that the team knows there is parental input being provided. Again, parents should sign, date, and return the document regardless of which option they choose. Signing and dating only affirms your selection of an option. Okay? And again, just to reiterate, whether you're agreeing with it or disagreeing it, requesting a conference or an IEP team meeting, you should still sign, date, and return the form. Okay, so now we have sped ahead to the end of the month. And by this time, this is when Dr. Savage has said that she hopes that special educators, at this point, the expectation is that parents will either have been contacted by their case manager and understood that there are no new student needs, The ASDM notice has been provided that there aren't going to be any amendments necessary, and the IEP can be fully implemented as written. Or parents will understand that the IEP has been amended with their agreement outside of an IEP meeting in an informal conversation, or the IEP needs to be or has been revised through the IEP team meeting. Those meetings are going to be scheduled over the next couple of weeks as well. Okay, so those are the goals. This is what has been shared with us from the school system as a timeline. We're sharing that with parents. And, you know, hopefully, again, when parents are receiving these proposals, they'll have a little bit better understanding of the thought that's been put into them, where this proposal has come from, and they can be prepared then to fully respond. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information thrown at you in a very short amount of time. Thank you for bearing with me as I read through those slides. We certainly are going to be posting this presentation and all of the slides for you. We should probably have that up tomorrow. I'm going to take a moment now and just pause and invite you to put your questions about the ASDM plan in the chat box for Roger to bring forward. And I'm going to invite my co-presenters, Trish Gunshore and Seid Margolis, to be ready to answer questions as we go through this as well, because some of this is going to be, I'm sure, clarifiers that will be helpful to have their input.
Okay, Beth, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so did you want me to start reading off questions or?
Yeah, so again, these questions are only specific to the ASDM plan, and I can back up to slides as necessary. The next section, we're going to be talking specifically about students who cannot access or benefit from virtual learning. So families, hang on for that conversation because we'll be getting to that next. Okay, Roger.
Can I just make 2 clarifying comments?
Yes, please.
So the ASDM plan should outline what will happen for your student while we're in virtual, blended, or small group, any of those 3. So it might have different pieces of information for each of those, virtual, blended, or small group. And then we revert back to the IEP when we're in normal, what we're calling normal operations. So it could potentially have 3 different sections for each area on the IEP. And the other options in each section could be like, for example, on transition NA, it's not applicable because your child is not over 14. Or it could say this section will be implemented as written, or it would say the changes that would be made. Each section can have one of those 3 options.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, so a couple questions that have come up. I'll try to hit some of them now. So the first question is for option 8, if parents choose the formal IEP meeting, will it be a separate meeting or will it be combined with other IEP topics? Will it be a focused IEP meeting or will other topics be brought in?
In all likelihood, that will be the only topic for that IEP meeting. Certainly you can bring up other areas of concern, but in all likelihood, we're trying to get that plan in place. So that would be the only topic for the meeting.
Okay. Next question is for the informal meetings, can an advocate or lawyer be present during the meeting?
Yeah, you can, a parent can always have whoever they would like to be present at a meeting, certainly.
Okay. And then this is slightly outside, but I'm not sure if it is covered later. Will there be discussions in here about data or discussions with the staff about how data is going to be gathered on IEP goals or on IEP or ASDM amendments?
So that should be part of the amendment as well. If the data collection process and procedures will be different than what's on the current IEP, those differences should be noted in the ASDM. Otherwise, you would assume that the data collection tools and processes will be whatever is currently listed in your child's IEP.
Okay. And then let's see if I got any other ones that are tied directly to this meeting. What happens if there is no formal agreement during an informal meeting? What's the next step?
I guess if there's, I would assume then the parent would be making a request for a formal IP.
Okay. I think the rest of these aren't necessarily tied to directly to the ASDM model. So I'll continue to copy the questions so we have them, and then we can ask them at the next break.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to invite Leslie to hop on now, and Leslie will be addressing the question of what we do for students who cannot access or benefit from virtual learning.
Thank you, Beth. So we know that there are students who really struggled in the spring because either they couldn't access and benefit from distance learning, or because they need in-person support in order to be able to do so. And our position is that if there are students who really cannot benefit from distance learning, then arrangements need to be made to have in-person services for them. We are not saying schools have to open. We are not saying school systems have to use their own staff. What we are saying is that school systems need to make arrangements to ensure that students who really cannot benefit from distance learning or who need in-person support in order to be able to benefit from distance learning need to have access to that. And it can take a variety of forms. School systems could choose to open schools on a very limited basis and use their staff. They could choose to open on a limited basis to other programs that use their staff. They could contract with private providers. They could look for non-public schools that have openings and temporarily place students in those schools. Really a host of potential options. But the question is whether there's documentation to show that a student has not benefited. And it's also important for families to exercise, for you to exercise your right to an IEP meeting to discuss the alternatives that are possible. We have at DRM represented a number of students, and we're getting a host of different responses, but the documentation is really key. So asking for that IEP meeting and getting documentation about whether your student is able and what it would take in order to participate is important. The options that have been considered, why they've been rejected, so prior written notice, and then exercising the rights that you have should you wish to take it further. We can talk about that later. So, as I said, the team can make, sometimes it may be that students can't look at the screen, but they can complete the materials, the classwork if the materials are provided to them physically. So paper-based packets or physical materials or manipulatives. But there may be a need to consider in-person services. And as I said, there are a host of ways that can be done. And there are some school systems who are doing that at this point. I think the bottom line is to remember that this is about what constitutes a free, appropriate public education for your child, based on your child's individual needs. So ongoing progress monitoring is important. So to get back to that question about data, I wouldn't necessarily assume that data will be collected. It should be in the way that it has been according to the IEP, unless the team makes a change. But asking that question is a good question to ask when you have when you have the opportunity, as your IEP amendment is your plan is proposed to you. Having ongoing communication between families, teachers, and service providers is really important, and certainly ongoing documentation. So we have, from the beginning, advised families to just take informal notes in addition to the monitoring, the progress monitoring done by school staff. We have really strongly advised families to just keep a log and note, what's happening as your child is doing distance learning. Do you see any regression? Do you see different behaviors? Is your child maintaining skills? Is your child making progress, as some children have? Just keep a log, keep notes. It can be informal. You can jot things down, but just keep a contemporaneous record, because it's going to be necessary, even if you don't need it right now as you work on your alternative service delivery plan. It will be important when school reopens and you need a discussion about whether your child needs compensatory services or different services or additional services. So that documentation of your child's progress is really important. I also really want to stress that it's the school system that is responsible for providing instruction and a free, appropriate public education to your child. All parents are expected to support their children through this process, but it is not your role as parents to be your children's paraprofessionals. If your child needs one-to-one constant support in order to access and benefit from distance learning, that's a role that goes way beyond what a parent should be expected to do. And that's where you may want to raise some of these questions with your team. So if we have gotten questions about attendance, about what if virtual instruction is not working? Am I going to be held accountable as a parent? What if my child won't log on? What if my child turns the computer off? Am I going to be risking truancy? You can't be. And that's where asking for an IEP meeting, if that kind of thing is happening, that's where asking for an IEP meeting will be helpful, and documenting what's going on with your child. So, again, maintaining accountability where it belongs with the school is really key. Do you want me to keep going, Beth? It's the it's helpful for you to bring information to the team's attention, and the team needs to make a decision about whether distance learning is working or not working. In other words, whether it's providing a free, appropriate public education, whether the distance learning or the alternative ways of delivering instruction, are appropriate. You should document your attempts to participate or to complete assignments. If your child is not having any part of it, at least document the attempts to try. If you're seeing regression, document that regression. If you are going out and getting private services, you definitely want to document that. Sometimes it's hard to know if a child is making progress, and it's not documented that the child's getting outside services, then it looks like the child's benefited from the school program, and it may be a combination of the school program and the private services, or one or the other. But it's having that documentation is really helpful.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to remind parents that we have addressed those questions and a couple other webinars that we've had since the very beginning that we've hosted around the COVID-19 and the closures. These are these are all on the Howard County Autism Society website. They've been recorded, so you can hear us talking about that and answering questions from parents around that topic. We know that many parents feel very accountable right now, and I think just to reiterate what Leslie said, it's very important for us to maintain the accountability with the schools where it lies. What on the screen now, you'll see this is a technical assistance bulletin that was released from MSDE. I've provided the link below, and this bulletin talks about how to address the provision of FAPE through these ASDM models for students with disabilities. And this is very helpful, I think, for parents to read through, because it is guidance that the school system should be using as well from MSDE on what the expectations are. And so included in this technical assistance bulletin, there are then questions and answers that are provided as well. So it's a very helpful document. And some of the language that we've used to put this presentation together and others, is pulled directly from this bulletin, technical assistance bulletin, a tab from MSDE. We have all of these tabs related to COVID on our website, but you can also go to MSDE and just type in technical assistance bulletin special education, and all of them, a whole list of them, come up on a variety of topics. So again, this is great information for parents. Okay, before we get into the questions, I want to make sure everybody has this information in front of them as well. These are your resources here in Howard County, several places that you can go. Parents Place of Maryland also offers pick a time for parents to sign up for individual conversations about IEPs. So there are many resources here to help you through this and to answer questions. If one of us cannot answer a question for you, we certainly will talk with the school system or talk with our resources, consult with Leslie at Disability Rights Maryland, and get you the guidance that you need. So please take these email addresses down and keep them handy so that we can be there to support you through this. Okay, so Roger, if you'd like to bring forth additional questions, we have about 15 minutes left.
All right, finally unmuted myself. So we had a lot of questions. I think some were answered, at least in part, in what Leslie talked about, and as well as in some of our previous sessions, as you pointed out. Beth, we had a lot of questions tied to how can we ensure if parents don't believe their child is accessing the curriculum virtually, what are those next steps, and how do we document regression and learning, and how will that be considered moving forward? So a lot of questions around that, and then flowing into compensatory services as well. So there's a section there. So I don't know if you want to address that generally or.
Well, I'll take the first part, and then Trish has guided us before on the discussion about compensatory education services, and she can perhaps chime in there But I'd like to just remind parents that this isn't a one shot, kind of a deal. So this isn't the only opportunity. When you get the ASDM plan, it is not your only opportunity to say that you have concerns. If you begin the next few weeks and you kind of ease into it, see how things are going, see how your family's adjusting to the schedule, and things are going fine, you may not need to raise more concerns. But if you get into it and all of a sudden after 3 weeks or so, it's not working or something's not working as well, please reach out to your case managers. This should be an ongoing communication between you and the case manager, between you and your child's general education teachers when there are struggles. So we really want to, kind of open to make it an expectation that this is a back and forth exchange with parents and case managers as we go through this. So anytime that you're feeling like you need to raise concerns, keep track of them and bring them forward to your case manager. Don't wait and then after first quarter say everything was a mess, we didn't benefit at all. Make note of that and share that with your case manager. Leslie, do you have anything else to add to that? Leslie, anything else to add to that?
Sorry, I thought you said Trish. My internet cut out for a minute. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I think just to address the data question that was implicit in that, I think what we would suggest is just whatever you see log. If your child won't sit at the computer, your child bursts into tears when you turn the computer on, throws the computer across the room, whatever it is, just note, September 2nd, burst into tears, had 25 vocabulary words on September 8th and has 50 words on October 28th, or 5 words on October 28th. Like, just whatever you're seeing, it doesn't have to be fit for you, for your own notes. But it is, I think our overriding suggestion would be, if you have concerns about the appropriateness of distance learning at any point in time, if you have concerns about the plan, ask for an IEP meeting. Nothing has changed about the fact that learning is occurring by distance as opposed to in a brick and mortar building. Doesn't change the fact that if you have concerns about your child's special education and related services, the route to take is to request an IEP meeting. So any concerns you have, you should be requesting a meeting and bringing those concerns and the support that you have for the basis for those concerns to the table.
Great, thank you. Trish, I'm going to ask you to chime in first around the topic of compensatory services, and then invite Leslie to add any other thoughts to that as well.
Right. Before I do that, I will just reiterate, Beth, what you shared about, seeking your child's case manager sooner rather than later. Because it is incumbent upon the IEP team to see if there are other services that they can provide to support your child. And I know there were lots of case managers who went above and beyond in the spring just to ensure that students were able to access, get on the right link, stay on the link. So they were providing schedules to families, schedules that students were used to seeing in schools, visual schedules, picture schedules, et cetera. So please reach out to your child's case manager so that they can try some supports first and see if they, in some way help your child to be able to better access. So we encourage you to do that. When we're talking about compensatory services, those are services that we would be incumbent upon providing to students if they did not make any progress during any time period. But for now, we're talking about the time period of virtual learning. So it's incumbent upon us to continue to be evaluating student progress. And that's what Beth had shared earlier that the teachers are doing this week, is taking some data about your child and seeing where they are at this current time, given the summer break and given what kinds of instruction happened in the spring. So all of this data that the teachers are gathering now is information that will help inform whether your child is in need of compensatory services. And then in order to determine if they are in need of compensatory services, that happens through an IEP process. I'll let Leslie maybe expand a little more about that.
Thank you, Trish. So I want to say, as the attorney who has been doing this work for a long time, I want to first say that we know that the school system has worked very, very hard through the spring, through the summer, into the fall to figure out how to manage this very unprecedented in this very unprecedented time. And when we use the term compensatory services, generally in the past, at least, it has conveyed the idea that the school system has done something wrong and it owes services to a child. So I think we want to first separate that idea out and recognize that what we're talking about here really is our makeup services for what everybody recognizes students should have had, but weren't able to get because of the fact that learning pivoted to distance learning, and that there's not an element of fault here, unless the teams deliberately failed to provide services, and we're not going to go down that path. So that said, not every student is automatically going to be entitled to compensatory services, which is why this brief observation is helpful, but also may not be determinative about whether your child does or does not need compensatory services. So, this observation is kind of a very quick look, but you may have additional information to support the need for makeup services for your child. You may have, you may come to a different conclusion than what the team concludes. It may be that that your child recoups skills very quickly, but there are additional or different services that are needed based on the fact that your child's been out of school for so long. So the kinds of discussions that should happen are, is there a gap between where your child would have been had school continued in brick and mortar buildings and where your child is now, and what services are needed? What are those compensatory services needed to bring your child to where your child would have been? But also, given the length of time your child was out of school, does anything need to happen differently? Does your child have to reacclimate to being in school? And are there additional counseling services or other supports that need to be in place as your child returns when schools reopen? And now also your child's facing a much longer school day, much more time on screen, and the team needs to be thinking about whether that is appropriate. So looking at those issues is important as well. And if your child can't manage a full school day, then that's also going to be an issue when you look at compensatory services down the road. So lots of things to consider, and don't look at this brief observation as the be-all and end-all for the compensatory services discussion.
And I'll just add that I want to say it was our first webinar, Leslie. We actually had quite a few slides on compensatory services. So you might check out that webinar. And then also parents, Rights Law is a wonderful resource for families. And there are articles on the Rights Law website, if you type in compensatory services in the search bar, that explain them exactly as Leslie has just shared. So those are good resources for families as well. Roger, any other questions?
I think one that I want to throw out there that I know has been probably covered in other sessions as well, but I think it's important, especially virtually, is how it's back to data collection and how the efficacy of data collection, both from a staffing side, how are they able to do that with video on and off, and as well as what role parents can or should play in data collection when it comes to this coming virtual.
Okay, I'll let Trish chime in on that. Trish, what should parents expect from teachers in terms of data collection?
So since the ASDM plan is an amendment to the current IEP, there should be an expectation that teacher is using the data collection method and frequency that's outlined in the child's IEP already, unless the ASDM plan says something different.
And can you remind parents, if they were to pull out their child's IEP, where they should look for the data collection method?
Right. So in the goals and objectives section of the IEP, it indicates the type of data that the provider is collecting and the frequency within which they are collecting that data. So it's embedded on the goals and objectives pages. So
Right.
things that need to be considered during the ASDM process, because if there is a data collection method that can't be done because you are virtual, that should be something that is written in the ASDM plan, that we won't be collecting data in X method, we have to use Y method. But going to the second part of that question, it is important, as has been stressed here earlier, that parents are collecting their own data, and things like that Leslie had outlined earlier about behaviors you see with your child, whether they can only maintain online for 10 minutes versus the 30-minute session, or any kind of data you see with the homework or the asynchronous work that they're being provided. And that's no different than what you do during the school year when you bring forth, my child can never do the math homework you sent home, things like that. So all of that information is as important for you to be providing to the school team. My child was never able to start their work. I always had to help them get started. Or my child was able to start but didn't understand how to read the directions. All of that information is important for you to bring forth as well.
I just want to add to that, because I think it's an important point, Trish. We were getting a lot of questions early on from people who were saying, I don't know how to collect data. I'm not a professional. I'm not trained to collect data. And I think the point that you just made is a really important one, following what I first said, which is that information is data. So that anecdotal, my child wouldn't log on, my child burst into tears when he saw people on the screen. That's information. That's information that you as parents have, and you collect it in your heads often, but don't necessarily write it down. And that's data. It's not that you have to, use a stopwatch and time things, or that you're doing it in a way that is it's collecting information and then sharing it. And all that we're saying, that we at DRM have stressed, is take that information that's in your head and put it down somewhere on paper, in your phone, on a calendar, because days, I think we're all finding in this pandemic world that days blur together, and that, you may not remember back to, April and then to May and be able to track, or to know that, on September 2nd, your child through the computer, and September 9th, he was able to sit and log in for, 10 minutes. So it's logging that kind of information, but that information is data. So don't feel like, oh my God, I can't do this because I'm not trained. You are. You collect that information all the time. And all we're saying is put it down in a place where you can recapture it, so that you can bring that to the teams when you meet.
And again, I stress, bring that to the team sooner rather than later. Given the example that was shared earlier, that the student that might not be able to get online at all, we had that happen in the spring, and we had teams who created like a technology integration plan to support the child in getting on the technology for increasing amount of times each day with staff that he knew. So they put together a plan that then enabled the child to access technology. So if you bring, that's just one example, but if you bring that information sooner rather than later, hopefully the team can brainstorm some supports that they might be able to provide.
Okay, we are right up at 8 o'clock. Roger, are there any other pressing questions at this point that we haven't in some way addressed?
Just one I want to bring up. I guess a couple of families seem concerned that if data is being collected this week for ASDM to help draft up the amendments, how are they doing that when in many cases, at least according to the parents, the videos are off? What are they basing these decisions on to write the ASDM then?
So I thought, based on some of the comments I saw in the chat, I thought this might be a helpful piece of information for you. The ASDM plan is very different from the ICOL plan in that the ASDM plan is saying we can implement this IEP in its entirety except for fill in the blank. And the ICO plan was the total opposite. The ICO plan was we can only implement this piece. The ASDM plan is we can implement everything, but, and they will have to fill in the but for you. So when you go into the mindset of reading the plan, it should be we're implementing everything on your kid's IEP except for things like we can't do hand over hand because we're not in person, or we can't do seclusion and restraint because we're not in person, things like that.
Thank you, Trish. That's important, a very important clarification, and I'm going to add that, I think, to the earlier slides, because we want to make sure that parents do understand that what they're going to be seeing when that plan comes home is more of what can't be provided from the IEP, in addition to the other adaptations and accommodations that may be necessary. So with that, I'm going to end our webinar. We thank you so much for joining us this evening and for being part of this conversation. We wish you luck in the weeks ahead, and we offer you our support in the weeks ahead. I have gone through and shared email addresses with you, so please reach out as necessary. And again, feel free to check our website, the Howard County Autism Society website, tomorrow for the slides and for the recording, as long as the recording works properly. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us this evening.
Can I put in one last plug for the Parent Empowerment Conference? So
sure, Trish, please do.
Thank you. We'll be holding the virtual Parent Empowerment Conference at the end of this month, September 29th, 30th, and October 1st. The first announcement came out from the Family Support Resource Center today. That you will also see that on the Howard County Public Schools website, but we encourage you, if you have time those evenings, to drop into some sessions, because they will be providing you direct information on how you can support your child's math instruction or reading instruction, or what will happen during the IEP process during virtual learning. So we encourage you to hop on to the Parent Empowerment Conference at the end of the month.
Thank you, Beth.
If I can put in one tiny plug, Disability Rights Maryland has been hosting Facebook Live Q&A sessions on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Next week's session will have a Spanish interpreter, so it will be aimed for families whose first language is Spanish. But if you think of questions after tonight, and you want to join one of our Q&A sessions, there, go to Disability Rights Maryland's Facebook page, and every Wednesday at 6:30 until people run out of questions, and we don't need to do them every week. So
that's
please feel free to join us.
Melissa, hopefully we can add that to our calendar of events for families as well, and share that.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning. Sure.
Yeah, it's wonderful too. Okay, with that, thank you everyone again for joining, and have a wonderful night.